Enough of the news. Glad you can join us, and welcome to the P.G.M show. Hello, and welcome to my first movie review of 2023. It's so good to have you here on the P.G.M show with your host, Peter Gord McKenna. Yes, those are my initials, and this is the show. Yes, and we are going to review for my first film, The Thing, as you probably heard and saw with my first promo of the year. John Carpenter's The Thing. I could not get enough of this film. I bought this in a New Zealand store called JB Hi-Fi. I picked it up. I did have some money in my bank account. I snaffled it because really you can't go wrong with having John Carpenter's The Thing in your collection if you're a movie buff. This is an adaptation. I hate that word. I cannot pronounce it. Along with the word preliminary. Stutter every time. Anyway, of a black and white film. The Thing is a 1982 American science fiction horror film directed by John Carpenter from a screenplay by Bill Lancaster, based on the 1938 John W. Campbell Jr. novella Who Goes There. It tells the story of a group of American researchers in Antarctica who encounter the eponymous thing, a parasitic extraterrestrial life form that assimilates then and imitates other organisms, such as a dog. And in this case, the group is overcome by paranoia and conflict as they learn that they can no longer trust each other and that any of them could be the thing. The film stars Kurt Russell as the team's helicopter pilot, R.J. McCready with a Wilford Brimley, T.K. Carter, David Clement, Keith David, Richard Dysart, Charles Hallahan, Peter Maloney, Richard Masur, Donald Moffat, Joel Polis, and Thomas G. Waits in supporting roles. Development of the film began in the mid-1970s when David Foster and fellow producer Lawrence Turman suggested to Universal Pictures an adaptation of a 1938 John W. Campbell novella, Who Goes There. It had been loosely adapted once before in Howard Hawks and Christian Naby's 1951 film The Thing from Another World. It's got some interesting facts of how this all started, because really John Carpenter wasn't the first director they actually went to. John Carpenter was first approached about the project in 1976 by the co-producer and friend Stuart Cohen, but Carpenter was mainly an independent film director, so Universal chose the Texas Chainsaw Massacre director Tobe Hooper, as they already had him under contract. The producers were ultimately unhappy with Hooper and his writing partner Kim Henkel's concept. After several more failed pitches by different writers and attempts to bring on other directors such as Don Landis, the project was put on hold. Even so, the success of Ridley Scott's 1979 science fiction horror film Alien helped revitalize the project, at which point Carpenter became loosely attached following his success with his influential slasher film Halloween 1978. Carpenter was reluctant to join the project, for he thought Hawks' adaptation would be difficult to surpass, although he considered the film's monster to be unnotable. Cohen suggested that he read the original novella. Carpenter found the creepiness of the imitation conducted by the creature and the questions it raised interesting, he thought. He drew parallels between the novella and Agatha Christie's mystery novel And Then There Were None, 1939, and noted that the story of Who Goes There was timely for him, meaning he could make it true to his day, as Hawks had in his time. Carpenter, a fan of Hawks' adaptation, paid homage to it in Halloween, and he watched The Thing from Another World several times for inspiration before filming began. Carpenter and cinematographer Dean Cundy first worked together on Halloween, and The Thing was their first big budget project for a major film studio. When the producers decided to actually take John Carpenter on, because he was an independent filmmaker at that time, John Carpenter jumped on board when he got finished with Escape from New York, and then he got everybody else involved with a great talented man called Bowton, who really gave us all to the creature of the thing, very grotesque in its assimilation and imitation. The creature effects, the Thing's special effects, were largely designed by Bowton, who had previously worked with Carpenter on Fog, 1980. When Bowton joined the project in mid-1981, pre-production was in progress, but no design had been settled on for the alien. Artist Dale Coopers had created some preliminary paintings of the creature's look, but he left the project after being hospitalized following a traffic accident before he could develop them further with Bowton. Carpenter conceived the Thing as a single creature, but Bowton suggested that it should be consistently changing and able to look like anything. Carpenter initially considered Bowton's description of his ideas as too weird and had him work with Plogue to sketch them instead. As part of the Thing's design, it was agreed anyone assimilated by it would be a perfect imitation and would not know they were the Thing. The actors spent hours during rehearsals discussing whether they would know they were the Thing when taken over. Clennon said that it did not matter because everyone acted, looked and smelled exactly the same before or after being taken over. At its peak, Bowton had a 35-person crew of artists and technicians and found it difficult to work with so many people. To help manage the team, he hired Eric Jensen, a special effects line producer who had worked on the Howling 1981. Sorry about that. To be in charge of special makeup and effects unit. Bowton's crew also included the mechanical aspects supervisor Dave Kelsey, makeup aspects coordinator Ken Diaz, mold maker Gunnar Ferdinandson, and Bowton's longtime friend Margaret Becerra, who managed paintings and hair work. To add to this, the miniatures were relatively in one scale to be either exploded or be used for the inner workings of the winter scientific base, and the matte painting was done by a matte painter who worked with Alfred Hitchcock, and that was on the matte painting of the flying saucer UFO alien ship. All-male crew and an all-male cast. Only the one woman in the casting was the Barbeau character voiced the computer. The only female, the only lady in the cast was Adrienne Barbeau. Then John Carpenter's wife, yes, lent the voice of the computer. It's a good scene. It's one of my favourite scenes, and really it's the start of the film as to when MacReady puts his whiskey or his whatever drink it is on the rocks into the computer and calls the chess lady BITCH or something like that. It was very, very funny. Locations were awesome. They were filming in Canada. Stuart, I think it was. Principal photography began on August 24th, 1981 in Juneau, Alaska. Filming lasted about 12 weeks. Carpenter insisted on 2 weeks rehearsal before filming as he wanted to see how scenes would play out. This was unusual at the time because of the expense involved. Filming then moved to the Universal lot, where the outside heat was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 Celsius. The internal sets were climate controlled to 28 Fahrenheit, minus 2 Celsius, to facilitate their work. The team considered building the sets inside an existing refrigerated structure, but were unable to find one large enough. Instead, they collected as many portable air conditioners and they could close off the stage and used humidifiers and misters to add moisture to the air. After watching a roughly assembled cut of filming to date, Carpenter was unhappy that the film seemed to feature too many scenes of men standing around talking. He rewrote some already completed scenes to take place outdoors to be shot on location when principal photography moved to Stuart, British Columbia. Carpenter was determined to use authentic locations instead of studio sets, and his successes on Halloween and Fog 1980 gave him the credibility to take on the much bigger budget production of the thing. A film scout located an area just outside Stuart along the Canadian coast, which offered the project both ease of access and scenic value during the day. On December the 2nd, 1981, roughly 100 American and Canadian crew members moved to the area to begin filming. During the journey there, the crew bus slid in the snow toward the unprotected edge of the road, nearly sending it down a 500-foot, 150-meter embankment. Some of the crew stayed in the small mining town during filming, while others lived on residential barges on the Portland Canal. They would make the 27-mile, 43-kilometer drive up a small winding road to the filming locations in Alaska where the exterior outposts sets were built. And to wrap up the factual side and getting back to me saying goodbye, thank you very much, here's a little bit of information on the music. Ennio Morricone Morricone composed the film score as Carpenter wanted the thing to have a European musical approach. Carpenter flew to Rome to speak with Morricone to convince him to take the job. By the time Morricone flew to Los Angeles to record the score, he had already developed a tape filled with an array of synthesizer music because he was unsure what type of score Carpenter wanted. Morricone wrote complete separate orchestral and synthesizer scores and a combined score, which he knew was Carpenter's preference. Carpenter picked a piece closely resembling his own scores that became the main theme used throughout the film. He also played the score from Escape from New York for Morricone. As an example, Morricone made several more attempts, bringing the score close to Carpenter's own style of music. In total, Morricone produced a score of approximately 1 hour that remained largely unused but was later released as part of the film's score. Carpenter and his longtime collaborator Alan Howarth separately developed some synth-styled pieces used in the film. In 2012, Morricone recalled. To add, Morricone did all the orchestration and recorded for me 20 minutes of music I could use wherever I wished, but without seeing any footage, I cut his music into the film and realized that there were places, mostly scenes of tension, in which his music would not work. I secretly ran off and recorded in a couple of days a few pieces to use. My pieces were very simple electronic pieces. It was almost tones. It was not really music at all, but just background sounds. Something today you might even consider as sound effects, as Morricone said. This has been me, and this has been The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. Thank you. Till next time, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.
This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation. It'll fight if it has to.